Hello fellow seekers, welcome back to my channel. This is Amanda, Artemis of Forrester, Rune Reader Diviner and Polytheist Mystic. I know it's been a long time since I brought you a video, and since the time that I've been active on YouTube, the world has gone through a lot, and so I apologize, but as I'm sure you've all been going through stuff too, so I'm not really going to go into detail. Me and mine are all okay, we're healthy. It's just been kind of a lot to deal with, so I just wanted to put that out there. We're okay, and I'm just trying to get back to whatever semblance of normal we can build right now. I think it's pretty important that we try to work on oh wow, sorry, a squirrel just really raced down the tree. You can obviously tell I'm filming this in the park for the first time. I got a tripod for my phone. This is the first time I've done that. That was a little distracting. Sorry about that. So I am filming this on the fall equinox. I meant to do this last week, but turns out I actually was completely ready and had all my notes, and my phone was too full to actually film a video. So once again, something stopped me from being able to make a video until the actual day of the celebration. So I had to stop again for a different reason, which is kind of interesting. So I had to clear out photos and apps to be able to have enough space to make this video, which is obviously more important than a lot of dumb Tetris games or what have you. So right, so today is the fall or autumnal equinox, and there are two equinoxes a year, the fall and the spring one, which is when the day and the night is perfectly balanced. They're the exact amount of time, which is the opposite of the solstice. Obviously in the summer you have the summer solstice in midsummer, which is the longest day of the year and the shortest night, and in winter you have Yule, which is the longest night and the shortest day, which is usually the 22nd, a couple days before Christmas, although they think a couple thousand years ago it would have been on Christmas Day. It's because it changes slightly each year due to the rotation of the Earth and how the Earth actually moves just slightly in space as it goes around the sun, just a tiny bit each year. So as these long rotations of thousands of years add up, there's a slight difference each year. So it's usually on the 21st or the 22nd, but this year it's the 22nd. The sun also moves in from Virgo, an earth sign, into Libra, an air sign. So we're dealing with a lot of earth and air energy right now. So what I'm going to be talking about mostly is the equinox, but also the Greek festival, the Eleusinan festival of Demeter and Persephone, or at least what we know of the Eleusinan Mysteries. And they had mysteries for each. They also had mysteries in the spring, but the fall mysteries were considered the greater mysteries, and the spring mysteries were the lesser ones. So the fall ones were considered more important in the spring. For those who may not know, Demeter and Persephone are responsible for the cycle of the seasons in Greek mythology. And what happened was, according to classical mythology, although the myth is told from Demeter's point of view, according to classical mythology, Demeter's daughter Persephone was kidnapped by Hades, the god of the underworld. And Demeter I try not to say was, because obviously I believe these gods are real, but when I'm talking about the past myths, I end up accidentally saying was. Demeter is the goddess of grain and the harvest, and of the earth's fertility and of crops. Her Roman name is Ceres, which is where we get the word cereal. So her daughter actually had the name, before she became the wife of Hades, the god of the underworld, her name was actually Kore, spelled K-O-R-E, but it's pronounced Kore, not Kor. And Kore just means girl or maiden. But Persephone actually means, I believe, dread queen. So it wasn't until she was actually able to separate from her mother that she was actually able to become, to actually fully be able to come into her own. A lot of modern polytheists and pagans who have experienced her personally, she doesn't feel like a victim at all. She feels she delights in her position as queen of the underworld. And we even have myths from the classical age of her defending the underworld from invaders, from Theseus, I think, from a couple heroes who got drunk and were dumb enough to think that they were going to invade the underworld and rescue Persephone. And she's the one who defended it from people who were dumb enough to invade the underworld. So Demeter wandered the world searching for her lost daughter, but like I said, most people think it was actually an excuse for Demeter and Persephone to run off together, and it was Zeus did give permission for Hades and Persephone to be married, just without Demeter's permission or knowledge. And eventually a compromise had to be worked out, where she would spend 6 months of the year with Hades in the winter and 6 months above ground in the spring or summer with Demeter. And so when she goes below ground into the underworld to be with her husband is when we get winter, because Demeter's so depressed without her daughter. She actually refused to attend to her duties in order to force Zeus to give her daughter back originally. Mankind, was in danger of starvation. So Zeus had to do something. But she had already eaten a pomegranate, which is the fruit of the underworld. Actually, it's sacred to Hera, which is the fruit of marriage. So that's also considered to possibly be a metaphor for sex. But she had already eaten a pomegranate, and she had to stay for as many months as pomegranate seeds that she had eaten. And so depending on the area, it would be either 3 months or 6 months or 5 months. Obviously, this is where it becomes a regional myth. Depending on how long winter is in your area, the number of pomegranate seeds she had eaten would change. Right. So that is the basis of the myth. And so why is it that the greater mysteries are the ones where Demeter is losing her, instead of the spring ones where she comes up out of the ground and Demeter regains her daughter? Why do you think that is? That's kind of interesting, right? Because you would think that the greater mysteries would be the hopeful one, where she is coming back. Spring is life. Spring is it's life. It is. There's really just no other way to put it, right? But Demeter having to deal with losing her daughter and everything dying in the fall it's a very human story. It's the story of loss, and it's the story of us having to deal with separation. And I'm sure those of you who are parents out there can probably relate to Demeter, in that even if you want your children to grow up, those of you who might be empty nesters might feel that pain of, you want them to grow up, you want them to move out of the home and have a life, but you still feel that pain of them being gone. And you might miss when they're a little girl, you might miss when they're Kore instead of Persephone, when there's a strong queen, you might prefer them being the little girl, because that gives you something to lavish your love on. And it is kind of hard for Demeter to actually be herself apart from Persephone. And for the longest time, I probably should have chosen a different park that had less people in it. For the longest time, I had a very difficult time relating to Demeter because of that. I had a mother that was very suffocating, let's say. That's a nice way of putting it. And so I really related more to her wayward daughter. It took me years to come to terms with Demeter. And part of that was it took me having to live on a homestead for a few years in Missouri and actually living within Demeter's realm and trying to eke out a living from the soil. That's what really, it's not that I didn't respect her power intellectually. I knew how important she was. I very much knew how important she was. But it is very difficult to truly feel that until you're actually living it. And that's something that we have really lost today, especially because you can go to a store and get blueberries and strawberries in December. And that's not natural, really. We don't know the joy of spring and of eating seasonally and how wonderful that is. And so we also don't really understand the loss of crops, really, because we can just go anywhere and get whatever we want at any time. And maybe it's not as good for you, and maybe they've been trucked thousands of miles from Argentina or whatever, and maybe they've lost some of their taste. But I mean, why do you think there's no pawpaws in stores? Then pawpaws are local to my area here in the Midwest, because they don't keep. They do not keep. They're good when they're fresh off the tree. And when I was in Missouri, I can't remember the name of it right now. Persimmons, that's it. We had persimmon trees on our property. Those you also do not see in stores. You can get persimmon preserves, but not actual persimmons. But they're also kind of astringent. They're not very sweet. They're very astringent when they're fresh. I like them, but a lot of people don't because they're very tart. But that is something, eating naturally and in the cycles of the earth is something that Demeter teaches. And in order to really respect her and to see her as more than just a suffocating mother figure, I had to actually live within these cycles on a homestead for a few years before I could truly respect her. And it was not easy. And there was some months we were eating from food banks because you can't just drop yourself on a homestead in the middle of the woods and just, nope, food's there. It doesn't work like that. And the reason that I'm back here is because we failed. My brother and I tried, we failed. But it was an experience and I wouldn't trade it. I would not trade it. Kind of miss it some days. Maybe one day I'll try again. But it was a hell of an experience. It was a dark time in my life because I kind of ended up living in the woods because of a lot of tragedies that happened. But it was also very healing and very educational. There go those squirrels again. Anyway, I'm ranting. Back to Demeter. Back to the festivals. Because I feel like these are Demeter's lessons and I'm not eating in cycles with the earth. Okay, so loss. I feel like her story is essentially one of depression as well. And if you actually separate out the mother-daughter aspect, which I feel like a lot, you actually shouldn't entirely. Because that is very central to who she is, and a lot of people will relate to her as a mother, and that's okay. But I am not a mother, and I am child-free by choice, and I will stay that way. But I also have serious depression, and so I can relate to Demeter as somebody healing from serious depression. And so that is something really important And in fact, when she went to Eleusis, before she found Persephone, you can really find a lot of details in her myth where she pretended to be human and was a wet nurse to the king's son. And like a lot of people with depression, that's pretending to be okay, until her chance of hope was ripped away, which was when she was making the king's son immortal. She was holding him in the fire in order to do that, and one of the maids found her, and obviously this old lady's holding the baby in the fire. She freaked out, screamed. Can't blame her. But that broke the spell, and so the king's son would no longer be immortal. And so then Demeter revealed who she was and asked them commanded them to build her a temple, and she isolated herself within the temple. And that's when she withdrew all her power from the earth and people began to starve. And that's when Zeus had to do something. Metaphorically, I mean, I have interpreted this as someone dealing with depression. If you take out the mother-daughter aspect, that's her pretending to be happy, putting on a fake face until a catalyst, something that she was holding on to, cracks her facade, and she completely isolates herself. And so I was able to relate to her on another level that way, with someone healing from depression. Now, once I was able to separate her from the mother aspect, I was actually able to relate to her as a mother, which sounds really ironic. But it was more, I needed to see her as more than a mother in order to relate to her as a mother. I hope that makes sense. Because a lot of women who only identify as a mother do get very oppressive. It's that it's that feminine energy that becomes toxic, because that is the only thing in life that matters to them, right? And so then if they give and give and give and give and give, and if you do not act exactly as they want, they can get very sullen and just take it out on you. And this is an energy I'm talking about, not a specific person. So obviously I have issues with motherhood in general. This is probably telling you a little bit too much about my history, but I think a lot of people come to spirituality through pain. But this was a woman who, through her rage and protectiveness of her daughter, was able to bend the king of the gods to her will. She was not able to get her back completely, which is probably good for Persephone, because Persephone needed to become the queen of the dead. I think Persephone wanted to be the queen of the dead. I think Persephone had that darkness in her. If you work with her at this, she's almost like got a Gemini energy. She's got that two faces of the spring maiden and the queen of the dead. And if you work with her at different times of the year, you'll get a different face. And if you work with her now, you can get either one, because those energies are mixed. And if you work with her in the spring, it'll be the same way. So that's not to say that the spring maiden isn't present in the middle of winter, or that the queen of the dead isn't present in the summer. It's like the yin and the yang, the seed of the white inside the black side, or the seed of the black inside the white, the yin yang symbol. You know what I'm talking about? So they're always there, but at certain times of the year, I believe that certain sides of her are more active. So that is important to me. Right now, on the equinox, where day and night is completely balanced, her two sides are completely balanced as well. So the Eleusinan Mysteries were, I'm not sure exactly how far, but they were about a day's walk or so from Athens. That was actually how the mysteries started. Was they would gather in Athens, and they would pray, and they would fast, and there would be sacrifices, and then they would walk all the way away from Athens to Eleusis, and it would take a day or two to do so. And so as they would do, so as I said, they would fast. So this is a lot of hard physical labor, and they're fasting, you realize. And when they got to Lucius, they would bathe in the sea, and when they got there, they would sacrifice pigs. So that's, if you're looking for an offering, pork or bacon would be a good offering. You could make a meal out of pork and cut a slice off for Demeter and Persephone. And like I said, we do not know the full extent of the mysteries because the initiates kept their oaths very, very well. We know about the outer part of it, like the procession to it. We know a little bit about what went on, but we do not know what went on inside. We know that they wore all white. We know that after they were initiated, the clothes that they wore would be saved and used as swaddling clothes for newborn babies for the next year. Which is kind of beautiful, right? The newborn babies would be wrapped in the clothes of that had been infused with sacredness. And that's like a layer of protectiveness. But we don't know the actual rituals that were involved, because a mystery is just that. It's a mystery. And so we do not know what they did. We know that it was in a temple, and that there were a lot of people there, and supposedly they all had visions. There may have been from a fermented mold on called ergot, which was on the wheat, but we do not know for sure that it was. We don't know for sure that was on it. So it may have had a psychedelic effect. But again, this is kind of speculation. We don't know for sure. And scholars will always, and there's nothing wrong with using psychedelics. And sometimes the ancients did. And I don't think that automatically discredits it. Using them in spiritual rituals. But scholars do tend to leap to that because they can't imagine people having actual spiritual experiences. So that's my opinion on that, because they're just like, oh, we just can't imagine that actually being real. A lot of scholarly books will preface with saying, well, of course, we don't actually believe these things today, but it's okay to study them. Like they actually have to defend studying it. So I'm just saying. What else do I want to say about this? Oh, it's a 14-mile walk. That's it. That's exactly it. It's a 14-mile walk. I couldn't remember the exact amount. If you're interested in numerology or anything. Okay. Another thing that's really interesting about the Eleusinan Mysteries. Mysteries were pretty common, but they were usually more restrictive about who could join. There would be men's mysteries, there would be women's mysteries, there would be mysteries just for mothers, mysteries for soldiers, etc. And that was okay. People had different, I know today we think that everybody needs to be, that it's presidential and that things should be available for everybody. But that's not the way it works, in my opinion, because people have different experiences. It's okay for there to be mysteries only for women and mysteries only for men, and mysteries for soldiers, etc., etc. There's different life experiences. But the Eleusinan mysteries were open to anybody who spoke Greek. That's all. You had to be able to speak Greek and had to be able to pay a small fee in order to get there. It was very small. It was just enough to cover the sacrifices and the supplies. And in fact, they were also open to slaves and tracheans. Which was almost anathema at the time. I mean, if you had slaves and they wanted to go, you had to let them. So this was something that was pretty interesting for the time. It was a great unifier, I guess, is what I am looking for the time. And one of the benefits, the religious benefits of this particular mystery, was that it was believed that after you had been initiated, that you would be given a special place in the afterlife. Into that you would not be one of the colorless shades that didn't retain memory or sensation, but that you would be let into the Isles of the Blessed. Because the Greek underworld is pretty complicated and has a lot of different afterlives. I believe the Orphics, it was either the Orphics or the Pythagoreans, I don't remember exactly, so don't quote me on that, actually believed in reincarnation. So I mean, even reincarnation is not unusual for ancient Greece, and this is something that's kind of hard for our modern society to wrap their minds around, because they're actually like, well, Christians only believe in one afterlife, so they had to only believe in one afterlife. But they had multiple sects, and so multiple traditions, and with multiple beliefs, which all interacted and existed beside each other. And that was not necessarily contradictory. I'm looking at my notes because I do have notes for this. The festival was 9 days long, I believe. And I've got a couple books that I will recommend at the end of this video. The one that I'm recommending for the Eleusinan Mysteries specifically, I have recommended on this channel before. It does use the Roman names, but I have recommended it before, and it's Classical Living, reconnecting with the rituals of ancient Rome, and I will probably use it again, but this is a fantastic one. This one does use the Roman name, so it uses Ceres instead of Demeter. But it is really, really good. And not only does it actually give you a good basis of the knowledge, but it also includes modern versions of the rituals and experiences, translations of ancient prayers. Each chapter starts with a quote from, if not Ovid, then from some ancient Roman, like Asclepius with golden ass starts as in donkey, not. Anyway, starts the chapter for October, and that's Isis. And yes, Isis is Egyptian, but she became very, very popular in Rome, which will probably be another video. All right, so as for the equinox, I wanted to mention a few things. One thing I wanted to say was that you're probably going to see Demeter mentioned as the goddess of corn, and you might get a little confused by that because corn is a new world crop. Corn / maize is from this world, from the Native Americans in North America. Well, apparently, and this is really confusing because I thought it used to mean wheat in the Victorian age. Well, it's actually even more complicated than that. Apparently, corn used to mean whatever was the biggest crop of an area. So it meant wheat in England and oats in Scotland. If you look it up, it's in several different places. It's like trying to, because of etymology and meaning of words changing, sometimes things get really confusing. Here we go. This is from Autumnal Equinox, The Enchantment of Mabon by Ellen Dugan. And I'm going to read you a small bit. The word corn once meant a little particle of something, such as a seed or a grain of wheat. Not a grain of wheat, such as a seed or a grain of wheat. Then I stumbled upon the fact that in botany, the name corn is given to the leading cereal crop of any major region. In England, corn meant wheat. In Scotland and Ireland, corn was oats. The grain called corn in the U.S. is properly or historically referred to as Indian corn or maize. So that's why Demeter is called the goddess of corn. Really, she's the goddess of wheat in Greece, but she's the goddess of whatever major crop is from your area. So that's confusing. That's because language changes all the time. Getting a handle of whatever language the country of origin for your gods are will really help. I would like to take a Greek class. I've studied a little bit of Norse. I think I have a better handle on Norse than Greek. And the reason for that is actually because the symbols are almost the same as English. Greek obviously has a different alphabet, the Cyrillic alphabet, and I haven't quite gotten a handle on that. So even though I've been Hellenic much longer than I've been studying heathenry, I have a slightly better grasp of Norse. Doesn't mean I can pronounce it. My pronunciation is shit. But I can kind of read a little bit. I would like to take classes in Greek and Icelandic again. I've taken one class in Icelandic. And I can kind of pick up maybe 1/5 of what's going on when I read text in it. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Yeah, picking up a little bit of language, or at least knowing the history of words, will be really helpful in studying. But you may have heard of John Barleycorn. There's an old folk song about John Barleycorn from England. And John Barleycorn, I think it might actually relate to Freyr from heathenry. But John Barleycorn, it's kind of a dark song in a humorous way. But John Barleycorn is the spirit of the grain. And it's a song about that's sung around harvest time. And Mabon, or the equinox, would be considered the second of the Wiccan harvest festivals. Mabon, by the way, is from Celtic. And the person who named it actually said the Eleusinan Mysteries fit the festival better, but all the other his name was Aidan Kelly. The Eleusinan Mysteries fit the spirit of the festival better, but all the other festivals were already Celtic or Anglo-Saxon, and he thought that giving it a Greek name would break the pattern, which I understand. Which meant son of the mother. It's Mabon something or other. I'm not even going to try to pronounce Celtic or Gaelic. As much as I like language, I'm not even going to try with that, because I have no history in Gaelic. I have a little bit of studies in others. He picked something that meant son of the mother, which he thought would be similar to daughter of the mother. And so, but there's actually no evidence that it was that Mabon's name and myths were actually related to the equinox, the fall equinox. The myth kind of fits the fall, but there's no evidence that it should actually be placed in this time frame, if that makes sense. But anyway, this is the second harvest. This is the harvest of the rest of the grain. The first grain harvest was a month ago, in the first week of August. Lammas is kind of weird. It would be July 30th, August 1st, or August 2nd. I usually do it on August 2nd, so it's exactly 6 months from Candlemas or Imbolc, which is February 2nd. Yes, which is Groundhog Day. In America. In America, that's Groundhog Day. So, what was I going to say? Yes, so that one is called like the bread festival, because it's the first grain that comes in and you make bread from it, and that's the first harvest. This is the second harvest, where you would bring in the rest of the vegetables and the rest of the grain. And then the last harvest festival is Samhain, known as All Hallows Eve classically, and that's actually has to do with ancestors, and it's also the meat harvest. It's when our ancestors would slaughter their animals, the ones that wouldn't be worth feeding all winter long, which is why it's also related to death, which makes sense, right? Because if you think about winter was hard to survive, then it would be something that you would be worried about them. You only want to keep the animals and to spend your resources feeding them, the ones that have the best likelihood of surviving the winter. The ones that don't, sorry buddy, you're out of here, because we're gonna harvest your meat and feed you. But I mean, we're gonna eat you, but that sounds like callous, which to modern people probably does. But this is the cycle of life. I think that our world is very sanitized. We are very separated from all the cycles of life, and in a way, being separated from it also breeds disrespect. I think if we see the death of our animals, we respect it more. We respect that meat. We do not let that chicken in the fridge rot if we see the death of the animal, right? Because that was something alive. It's not something that you pick up at the store that's cleanly packaged and like perfectly on these little styrofoam, which is also bad for the earth. I hate styrofoam. This is going really long, and I'm really worried that I'm going to run out of time, because we're at 37 minutes. Alright, so John Barleycorn, I'm going back, I'm sorry. John Barleycorn is the Lord of the Harvest, and it's basically a medieval version of Freyr and the sacrificial god. And it is a it's a European old man sacrificial god story that survived up into the 1700s, which is really fascinating and shows you how important this folklore was. Super, super important to the people of the time. I mean, these are, I mean, it's been remixed into songs. You find different versions of this poem all over the internet. It's usually listed as author unknown, but it was published in 1782 by someone named Robert Burns. So we actually don't know if Robert Burns actually wrote it or if he just wrote it down, because it could have been one of those oral stories that just got passed around. But I am going to end this by reading John Barleycorn. And like I said, I think this is a medieval survivor of Freyr, who is the brother of Freya, who is the god of grain and heathenry. Alright, John Barleycorn. There are 3 kings into the east, 3 kings both great and high, and they have sworn a solemn oath that John Barleycorn must die. They cook a plow and plowed him down, put clouds upon his head, and they have sworn a solemn oath that John Barleycorn was dead. But the cheerful spring came kindly on, and the showers began to fall. John Barleycorn got up again, and sore surprised them all. The sultry suns of summer came, and he grew thick and strong. His head well armed and pointed spears, that no one should do him wrong. The sober autumn entered mild, and he grew wan and pale. His bending joints and drooping head showed he began to fail. His color sickened more and more. He faded into age, and then his enemies began to show their deadly rage. They taken a weapon long and sharp, and cut him by the knee. They tied him fast upon a cart, like a rogue for forgery. They laid him down upon his back and cudgeled him full sore. They hung him up before the storm and turned him o'er and o'er. They filled up a darksome pit with water to the brim. They heaved in John Barleycorn, there they let him sink or swim. They laid him out upon the floor to work him further woe. And still, as signs of life appeared, they tossed him to and fro. They wasted o'er a scorching flame the marrow of his bone, but they millered him worst of all, for they crushed him between two stones. And they have twain his very heart's blood, and drank it round and round. And still the more and more they drank, their joy did more abound. John Barleycorn was a hero bold, of noble enterprise. For if you do but taste his blood, 'twill your turds will rise. 'Twill make a man forget his woe, 'twill heighten all his joy. 'Twill make the widow's heart to sing, 'twere the tear were in, though the tear were in her eye. Then let us toast John Barleycorn, each man a glass in hand, and may his great prosperity never fail in old Scotland. Now, as you can see, this is obviously a tale of the not only cutting down the grain, but then what you do with it. It's the story of how you cut them down and how you how you thresh the wheat, and then even making beer out of it. They take his very heart's blood and drink it round and round, and still the more and more they drank, their joy did more abound. And so this is paying respect to the fact that life comes from death. All life comes from death. Even vegetarians who think that they don't. Sometimes they say, I don't eat anything with a face. But even vegetarians come from death. And I am there. That's the cycle of life, because I believe everything has a spirit. Alright, so we're at 42 minutes now. I really better wrap this up. The other book that I'm going to recommend, because I've recommended two now, this is from the Llewellyn Sabbath series. The Samhain one is actually my favorite, and I think it has the most variety of prayers to different gods. But this one still has quite a few. The Llewellyn Sabbath Essentials, there's one for, obviously that means there's 8. So this has a lot of information both about the traditions and then new versions. It has recipes, it has crafts. The Samhain one was one that got me started, and it's got a prayer, it's got an invocation to Hecate. Well, it has an invocation to Hecate and Persephone, but I meant to say Persephone. It's got a prayer to Persephone in the Samhain one that I use every year now, because the first time I used it, my candle cracked very, very loudly, and I took that to mean that she was present and pleased. That actually made me jump. So now I use that particular prayer every year. But that was one that got me started in collecting this series, so I have all 8 of them now. So I'm gonna sign off because I'm not sure how much time that I have left. This is definitely the longest video I've made, so like, subscribe, share. If you can think of any other subjects that you would like for me to talk about, let me know. I'm sorry it's been so long since I've made a video. I'm sure everybody realizes that I'm sure a lot of people have had their lives disrupted, but happy Equinox, happy Mabon. I hope everybody has a happy festival. Go.